Welcome into the Badger Red Zone podcast. Wisconsin falls 38-14 at Alabama in week 3. So as most of you know, my expectations going into this game were pretty low. I did take some heat from some folks on Twitter in the first quarter for perhaps being a little too positive when they were down 14-0. But I thought at the time, all things considered, they were playing pretty well, minus 3 big mistakes that really shifted that game early. And, maybe my expectations were so low that I believed in my head all Wisconsin had to do was, not get completely blown out of the water, and then they would exceed set expectations. But the reality is nobody expected Wisconsin to win that game for the most part. Alabama has now won 86 in a row at home against unranked opponents. We'll start with this. Colin, did you see anything on Saturday that made you believe the needle is moving forward with this program and what was a huge test? Again, knowing that, Wisconsin was really up against it, backup quarterback, you're playing an Alabama team that already suffered a loss like we talked about last week. They're going to have a different hunger and desire versus a Wisconsin team that came in 2-0 and hasn't really had to look too much inward yet and had their flaws really exposed. But we're in year 3 of the Luke Fickell era, and to me, it felt like this program really hasn't moved an inch yet.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think when you hire Luke Fickell, you make a hire like that, you take a risk like that. Like we've talked about in the past, you expect to be in a different place for this program, and we're not there. We're not there. I mean, you see the same results playing against a big team on the road, which, including when I was there, I mean, we couldn't get it done on the road in some big games. And, if you're going to make a big change like this, you expect a different result. So I think there should be some clear frustration with that in the stagnancy of where the program is. But also, I mean, in a positive note, I think the defensive line and the front did a good job stopping the run. There were some positive plays where you could see Wisconsin's physicality, but that was overlooked by a lot of other negative plays and big plays that they gave up. And the offense, they just didn't really get anything going till the end there. And by that time, Bama's putting in their twos and their true freshmen to get some playing time. So there's I think unrealistic expectations that from fans that we should have won that game. Are we coming to win the game? I mean, realistically, you don't expect that, but you do at least expect to compete. And I don't even think we really did a good job of that. So there's not much of a big needle moving forward right now.
Maybe there's a game in your career that relates to this one. I'm guessing there's not, because the programs were in such completely different places. And I know as a player, I mean, you don't get to the level that you played at by thinking you're going to lose any game. And I'm sure that's not any different for, Wisconsin's players. But maybe looking back on it now, is there a game you look at your career and were like, we were just completely overmatched? The chances of, winning that one were slim to none. And did you get anything out of it, if there was one on top of your head? Or was the program just in a different place at that point where, you knew you could still beat anybody?
It reminds me a little bit of 2019 Ohio State.
Okay.
At Ohio State. I mean, the results were pretty similar. I felt like that we were overpowered that game. We didn't really have an answer, very minimal momentum, very similar to this game. And we ended up playing the Big Ten championship and playing the Rose Bowl. But this is a different team. This is a different culture, different leadership. We'll see how they respond to this. And really what matters is from here on out is Big Ten play. And I think that's how fans in the state of Wisconsin should judge this team and Luke Fickell, is how they handle Big Ten play. But, again, you want to be in these games competing. And we adjusted by then playing Ohio State again in the Big Ten championship. And we had a chance to win the game, and we still didn't. But they respected our play. They respected the way we played. And that's what you want in those big games, when you may not come out with a win, but you make them respect you for what you put out onto the field.
Yeah, somebody asked me on the board, what do you want to see from Wisconsin? And that was one of the things I brought up. I think ideally you would like Alabama leaving that field, never wanting to see you again, and being glad they don't play in the Big Ten. Now, maybe that's wishful thinking. I don't know, but there are a lot of teams that, even like you mentioned, that when they beat you guys, they wanted no part of you down the road. They you were an opponent nobody looked forward to for the most part. Alabama obviously did not feel that way about Wisconsin on Saturday, and I think three big issues from this game. And again, I didn't expect Wisconsin to win. I predicted 38-13. Missed it by a point. Frankly, it should have been worse. Wisconsin's scores come on a garbage time touchdown against the reserves and a 98-yard kickoff return from Vinny Anthony. Alabama also dropped a touchdown pass. I think they had two other drops that would have resulted in big plays. I think they scored on those drives anyway, but maybe they squeeze out another drive or two just by saving the time there. If you're Wisconsin and you rewatch this game, I just didn't feel like they made Alabama earn a whole lot. I didn't feel like the Crimson Tide had any real wow moments in the game. And I'm not saying, they're not good and taken away from the win whatsoever, but their big plays to me felt maybe more embarrassing for Wisconsin than they were special for Alabama. Did you kind of feel that sense too, that it was just too easy at times, especially after that first quarter?
Yeah, 100% agree. I didn't feel like we made them earn really anything in the big plays that they had. Um, their receivers kind of did whatever they wanted that day. Clearly, I mean, if you go
Right.
back and watch the big plays, um, I had a good view of the game and was able to see kind of the back end unfold on a lot of those passes. And I mean, there were just gaps, and it was just too easy. I mean, I know that their quarterback at Alabama did a great job all game making decisions quick, not really giving the defense too much time to be able to get to him. But in times he did extend plays, and we didn't make them pay in those times either. So I think making them pay for their mistakes was a big reason why it got out of hand so quickly. And then again, I saw some things in coverage that should have been avoided and could have been avoided when it comes to just understanding the coverage, understanding how they can help each other out in the back end, and it just wasn't working.
I was going to ask, what did you see from the secondary? Because it was kind of reminiscent of that 2022 Ohio State game that, where CJ Stroud just put on a show in Columbus, where, as soon as he hit his drop back, that ball's coming out. Guys are running wide open. You had the all 22 view, I think, from where you were sitting, and we're probably able to see it pretty well. And, we all know going into the season, the cornerbacks were one of the biggest question marks, given that Wisconsin doesn't have Nizer Forkerine. And in a game like this, even Wisconsin's best cornerback, Ricardo Hallman, isn't going to match up all that well with a guy like Ryan Williams, but who is. Was there anything you saw as to a reason why Alabama's receivers were getting the ball so quickly and getting to getting the ball not only quickly, but they're at the second level, 2-3 steps ahead of Wisconsin's secondary for most of the day, it felt like.
Yeah, I think some of the secondary just didn't understand where their help was in a lot of these plays. Maybe they had inside help and they overran the inside, and you see Ryan Williams breaking out to the sideline, and it's an easy gimme.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were a lot of holes in the middle. I mean, there were a ton of digs being thrown and caught, and there's just some things that I think just holes in the defense they took advantage of. And then, of course, the quick game that they had. I mean, they were just chipping away at some of these sit routes that they were doing and getting 6 to 8 yards a pop on it. So there's just some things when it comes to, I think, not just the scheme, but understanding the game in itself of where your help is, where you can slide to based on the eyes of the quarterback. There's a lot of different things that I think that the secondary was missing on Saturday that Alabama took advantage of.
Yeah. Because Wisconsin, after that, first drive, maybe second drive, they weren't able to get a lot of pressure. And like I said, it felt like the ball was coming out way too early for the pass rush to even make an impact and affect Ty Simpson in any way in terms of being able to take him out of a rhythm or throw him out of his comfort zone. Schematically, if you were Mike Tressel, what would you maybe have done differently? And does it start with being more creative with pressures, or at least maybe just showing some more crowding the line of scrimmage to get him to think? Or what did you maybe see from him as to why Wisconsin just couldn't throw him out of any type of rhythm because he's 24 of 29, almost 400 yards. And like I said, he should have been 27 of 29.
Yeah, I think our pass rush, you can count on them to win more times than not in some of those times when the quarterback's holding the ball. But when he's not holding the ball like that, you don't
Yeah.
have too many opportunities. So that's when the coverage you need to have coverage sacks, in those moments where your coverage can take away those sit routes where he might have had his first read, it's not there. And if you can take away that first read more times than not from college quarterbacks, a
Yeah.
lot of them panic. Not saying Alabama's quarterback would have, but if you take that first read away, that buys some more time for your D line to get there. And we didn't take anything away on those quick games, so it just created more and more holes and just extended drives. The defense was on the field for a long time, and especially in that heat. I mean, you and I were both out there. Wisconsin's not used to playing in that type of heat, and so when you have the defense on the field for that long, eventually things are going to start to leak, and it's never good.
The second thing that I think bothers Wisconsin fans or should bother Wisconsin fans, those miscues in the first quarter, whether it was penalties or the Danny O'Neal interception, this has been a big problem under Luke Fickell in big games where sometimes they just don't even give themselves a chance to win. Uh, Starting with the Danny O'Neal interception, Wisconsin gets a fourth down stop. They have a chance to throw the first punch in that game on the road, which, again, I'm not saying they would have won, but that changes the game if you're able to go up 3-0, 7-0, and maybe make Alabama play a little more off script if they're having to play in a hole. I don't know if you watched it on TV again or what you thought of it live, but breaking down that decision, you were a safety. Maybe you think something differently, but from my perspective, that should have been his primary read when I think it was Vinny Anthony on the other side, and you're counting on a comeback route here. So he sees he's got one-on-one on the outside. He sees that safety creeping down in the box, it looks like. He never really turns his head to the left. I don't know where his eyes are. I couldn't see on TV. I doubt you could see either. But his head seems to be on Anthony the entire way. And that safety's dropping back into coverage after kind of disguising a blitz there. Do you see any reasonable or do you see any reason why he should have made that throw, or did something throw him off in your opinion? Because, like I said, I mean, you see that safety creep in the box, your eyes should have been on him the whole way just to make sure he was coming and then make the throw.
I noticed that a few times during the game where it was one high, safety was in the middle, or maybe that
Yeah.
they didn't have safety help, and that wideout is running straight downfield. And most QBs choose to take that one-on-one and just try to make a big play happen or draw pass interference, whatever it might be. Um, Maybe he was trying to look off the safety and try to get something in there. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. You're
But
confused
I
by it
know
too, though, right? It's not.
yes.
Okay.
And yes, no, and people should be confused by it because I did notice that throughout the game is there were some one-on-one deep ball matchups that you could try to take advantage of, and especially when you need a big play, you need to extend the drives. I mean, you can count on either a catch or you can count on a DPI, which 50-50 on a lot of those plays. So that was interesting, and the second interception, going back and rewatching it, it was really, from my view, was on the tight end. The tight end just kind of
Oh,
ran
okay.
his route deeper than it should have, and it wasn't a tighter angle on his route, and he was counting on that tighter angle, and it was just too easy for the safety. So there were a lot of issues, I think, and it's not always on Danny O'Neal. So that's what I saw in that second interception. But those one-on-one matchups when the safety's not there to help with the high safety, I mean, go take your shot, especially in those games when you're trying to extend drives and make something happen.
And so Wisconsin gives the ball back. I think it was a second or third down. I would say most people don't agree with the call. The Mason Reiger roughing call. Alabama scores a touchdown on the next play to go up 7-0. Did you like that call? It felt 50-50 at best to me, and in a game like that, I personally I don't think it was warranted.
No, I agree. And
Okay.
I might be biased because I'm a defensive player, but roughing the passer has really gotten a lot more sensitive in the last several years. And it's hard. But when you're in those moments and you may have a call that's against you, you can't let it sit. The call is what it is. You have to keep playing ball and you have to go respond. And having that ability to do that is something that everybody, in college football from those play calls, but you just got to learn how to respond to those and keep playing. But no, I mean, there were a lot of moments I think where we had some momentum going and then big plays happened, right? I mean, we had a big sack. Um, and then, the next play, touchdown pass from Bama. Um, we ended up having that kickoff return, obviously, and they responded very quickly to that.
Yeah.
There's some big plays that I think that we kind of killed the momentum on based on how Bama responded. So you have to match that in those games, match the ability to respond in a big way.
So again, Wisconsin gets its offense going a little bit. They're inside the Alabama 40, I believe. Then you get the hands to the face on Joe Brunner, which is a 15-yard penalty. You go outside Alabama territory. Can't really do much with it. Tough decision there for Luke Fickell. I think it's 3rd and 10 or 4th and 10, 4th and 11. Do you want to punt in Alabama territory or roll the dice down 14-0? Knowing that Alabama kind of started to figure out Wisconsin's defense there, would you have maybe done it differently and taken your shot inside Alabama territory and relied on your defense? Or they got a great punt out of it. You can't blame what Atticus Bertram's did, pinning them down at the 2-yard line. I think if you knew that ahead of time, you'd definitely punt it. But in the moment, knowing your offense had started to click, knowing Alabama's got all the momentum, also knowing that you're not going to beat a team like this on the road without taking some risks. Would you have gone for it there, done anything differently?
I was thinking the same thing in that moment, kind of what would be the right call. And I think having them earn a 90+ yard drive on, a defense that may or may not be having momentum yet. I mean, make them earn that, going into the second half. And, they had a long drive with it and clearly they earned it.
Yeah.
They had a great drive from that and was able to make some big plays. But, I think it just goes back to, I don't know if this team really knows who they are yet. If you know who your offense is and you have an identity, which we've gone back to identity several times, but if you know who your offense is, know who your defense is, I think it's a lot easier to make those decisions. But I don't think this team knows who they are yet. And that makes decisions like that very difficult, especially against Alabama. But, they did all the right things. They pinned them back, flipped the field, and we couldn't stop anything. So they earned a 90-yard drive, and maybe that's what we deserve out of it because that's we challenged them on it.
Do you worry about coaching after seeing a game like this? Because, like I said, this isn't the first time where these self-inflicted wounds have come up in the biggest games of the Luke Fickell tenure. He's now 0-7 against ranked teams, and I think you can go back and look at any one of them and just see some times where this program has really shot itself in the foot. It hasn't always, cost them the game directly like it may have Saturday where you put yourself in a hole and then Alabama's off to the races. But do you worry about coaching and leadership when you see this happen time and time again? Or is it more of just a product of the era that we're in where you're relying heavily on the transfer portal and there's different bodies in there every single year, 15 to 18 new guys that, just aren't familiar with your coaches, familiar with the program and all that?
Could be a mix of both. I mean, depending on how this culture is now. I mean, clearly it's not where they need to be or want to be culture wise, coaching wise. And in these big games, as former players, you have so much pride in the program in these games. And I know you and I connected severely on after the game after Notre Dame and in 2021. And
Yeah.
I was so disappointed in our play because of how many alums were there. So many people showed up to watch us. They wanted to believe in Wisconsin to win these big games. And when you get guys from the portal, that may not mean as much to them when it comes to a program centered win, right? And this could be a program staple, especially for Luke Fickell going on the road and beating Alabama. So it should mean more that way. But when you got guys that are just coming in for a year, they're coming in maybe for more money, they're motivated a little bit differently. The motivation's got to be different and on a different higher level that maybe I don't understand, because those type of games are more about the program, not about you. And that's where I think Wisconsin's had a chance. At least fans believe that they would have a chance to win these games because that was always the mentality. And it's not that anymore, just because of maybe the culture change, maybe the coaching change, and also the portal. I think it's a mix of both. But we are not good enough, clearly, to play individually to win these games in these big moments. We're not good enough. And it showed on Saturday.
You touched on the third thing that bothered me about that game. Perfect segue. In interviews, and I know, guys handle things differently, and, like I've always said, what's said in the media may not be how a guy's actually feeling. But, interviewing the player, and I know there's a cooling off period as well, but after the game, and I talked about this with somebody else on the way home, it just feels like the players are almost numb to this. It didn't seem to bother many guys what happened on Saturday, and actually wrote down the notes about, how you were after the Notre Dame game, and how a lot of guys have been, where, this game was life and death to them almost. I mean, you lose a game like that, you lose a game to anybody, you could find a guy that was potentially about to break down in tears over it. Outside of Riley Mullman on Saturday, in terms of the guys that they brought forward to speak, he was the only guy that had some emotion, and I wouldn't say it was necessarily over the top, super raw. He was just agitated by the inability to run the ball effectively once again, and another slow start for his team. But like I said, guys just kind of feel numb to me about this. I mean, do you worry just that there's going to be a stagnant there's going to be a stagnance with this program, and that they've kind of settled into accepting what they are or what they've been the last 3 years? Because we talked about this after Middle Tennessee, where there was no sense of urgency, nobody was irritated by yet another slow start. Guys just don't seem to have the attitude that I think fans want after the game, especially, like I said, when you're now 0-7 against ranked teams. And, you mentioned, I think you said it exactly this way after that Notre Dame loss: we can't be numb to this, I believe is exactly what you said.
It's a toxic and contagious feeling when you get used to losing. And this team won only 5 games last year, lost big games. Now they're kind of going back into that repeated feeling from this past game. And again, it goes back on leadership and how much it means to these guys. And if it doesn't mean as much to them as it meant to us back then, I mean, we were able to respond and win 8 straight, and we were able to get in a rhythm. But it's still possible. But you got to have guys that care. You got to have guys that have a fire, that want to be able to believe that you can go and win these big games. There wasn't one time that I never doubted that we could win any of those games back in 2021. We didn't get the result we wanted, but because we believed, yeah, we're pissed off because we should have won the game. There were things that we could have controlled that could have controlled the outcome of the game. And if you don't feel that as a player, then you got a long season ahead of you, because you got a lot of big games going forward. So you can either handle this as it's just another day, it's just another game. Like you said, we're numb to it. Or you can respond a little bit differently and be excited for, you got about 4 or 5, and really every other game now is a big game that you can believe and control to win. And if you don't have that, then I feel really bad for those guys that do care in that locker room. I feel really bad for these Wisconsin fans going into the rest of this season. So that attitude's got to change. The leadership's got to be different and on a different level now, especially when you come off a big loss like this and you come off of a big game like this that wasn't your outcome. But time will tell. And I think it hurts too that maybe Billy Edwards maybe he is their biggest leader on the team. I'm not in the
Yeah.
locker room, I don't know, but maybe Billy Edwards is their guy. And there's only so much you can do on the sideline and not being able to contribute and play right now, which could be hurting them leadership wise too. So who knows? We don't know, but there's got to be a change in attitude. Definitely.
Speaking of Billy Edwards, Luke Fickell said, there's a chance he plays against Maryland. But, let's talk a little more Danny O'Neil just in case we don't get to anymore. Like I said last week, I was really interested to see what he did against a formidable defense that, kind of made him play off script a little more. You knew Alabama would probably take away Wisconsin's one or two best things. They did a great job on those end arounds and jet sweeps. He was going to have to hang in the pocket more, make decisions, beat Alabama with his mind a little more, and push the ball downfield. I thought it was really telling about the way Jeff Grimes used him through the first 2.5 quarters up until Wisconsin found themselves in too big of a hole to recover from. It was a lot of the same to me in terms of how they wanted him to distribute the football, get it out quick, keep it short. He was 1 of 5 when he had to throw for over 10 yards. And then the one completion came in the fourth quarter to Jaden Ballard on that, meaningless touchdown there. But they didn't really let him loose until the third quarter, I felt. And maybe some of that's just the early interception, after you see a guy that might be shaken a little bit. But did the way Wisconsin attacked Alabama tell you anything about maybe what they think about Danny O'Neil going forward this season?
It's hard to judge on this game, especially when your center goes down. You go through 3 centers in that game.
Yeah, good point.
That doesn't help at all either. There's a lot of pressure on you when you're trying to drop back and throw a deep ball when you're on your third center of the game, right? And so that's hard. It's hard to judge off that as well. I mean, there's only so much he can do, and I think I don't know the exact number, but he dropped back to throw probably more times than what was shown on the stats of what he'd thrown, and he was running. And so it's hard to judge that, but also going back to those one high coverages and seeing that one-on-one deep ball, maybe he was coached to not throw those this week. Like, we don't know, but we would love to see some bigger play opportunities. I think everybody would like to see that because we do have weapons. And like we said before, you can't establish the run game by just running reverses and end arounds all day. These better teams are too fast and they're smarter than that. So, I think there's got to be a balance too in the run game that we got to establish, and that's clearly been a struggle. So it limits him in those ways too. So it's hard to judge right now, even off that game.
Yeah, that was my next point. He didn't get a lot of help from the run game either. And, when you're one-dimensional like that, it can be nightmarish for a quarterback. Wisconsin runs for just 92 yards on 34 carries. We know the struggles of the offensive line. They've been beaten to death at this point. Wisconsin's got a couple young kids up front that need to grow up a little bit. Obviously, they need Jake Renfro healthy. Not a lot yet I think we need to talk about there, but I did want to talk about the running backs. And I thought they were maybe exposed a little bit on Saturday. Now, obviously, having better blocking and getting a push up front, changes some things, changes a lot of things. But a former Wisconsin coach, who I always used to rely on, he said something to me that, I still kind of hold with me today. It was more in regards to evaluating high school film, but regardless of what side of the ball they were on, he always said, watch what happens when somebody tackles somebody or they're getting tackled. When they get tackled, do they just stop or do they go forward? Or vice versa, if you're the one tackling. Dylan Jones and Darian Dupree, when they got tackled on Saturday, they completely stopped. And that was a little bit of a red flag for me with those two. The one play that comes into mind, I think it was the third quarter, maybe the fourth. It was the third quarter where Darian Dupree gets the edge there. He's got a one-on-one with the safety, and he's kind of hesitant. The safety sort of hits him from the side, but he goes down like he was shot by a gun. And this started on the first play of the game where I think it was a 2nd and 1. Dylan Jones gets the first down, but he comes up and gets smacked and just goes backwards. It was all day with those two young running backs. To me, it felt like they need to get bigger, stronger, or at least just come in that hole with a different mentality, because I don't remember any times until late in the game. I think Jones had a nice run up the gut against the reserves that, those two were really able to punish the Alabama defense in any way, or really just fight for any extra yardage.
And it's tough when you have the laws of physics, right? When you got bigger guys, you got bigger, stronger guys in front of you, when you're trying to carry the ball. But from my perspective, I mean, I was never really I never outnumbered my opponent in my size. But one thing that could change was my mentality and how I make them pay and how I make them feel me, at least, regardless of whether I was going backwards or forwards. They were at least going to feel me every single play and see kind of what they were going to feel throughout the game, and if who was going to tap first. I know it wasn't going to be me. So it was kind of that mentality kind of has to change when you do have those type of players at Alabama that might be bigger and stronger. And they played well. Alabama's defense played very well. I mean, it was night and day different than when they played Florida State,
Yeah.
with the way that they were physical and the way that they could hit you in the mouth. But you got to respond to that. You can't fold. You got to be able to just match the energy every single play. And in those games, if you don't, then those are kind of the results. And I remember that play when 18 ran across the field on off to the side on that one run, and golly, they were flying around.
Yeah.
I do respect that out of Alabama, but Wisconsin's got to learn again responding to those type of adversities.
When you were a safety, was there ever a running back you went up against that you just knew didn't want to bring it? I mean, does this game remind you of anyone that you had in your career where you could kind of fly up to the football, pin your ears back, and continue to just pound away at the offense like that?
Well, I remember 2020, Indiana had a running back. He was about 6'3". I think he was around 230, just about 4 pounds or 4% body fat. And we kept scheming up to where he would bounce off to the edge and I would be the one to meet him in the hole. And I kept hitting him high, kept hesitating just because I didn't, we were kind of more in the open field. And he just kept knocking me back and knocking me back. And I got tired of it. So then I finally realized, well, he's not going to break down and try to juke around me. So the next time that he runs and he bounces, I'm triggering and I'm aiming right at his kneecaps, and he's going to absolutely feel what he should have felt all game. And so I've been in those situations where I'm like, golly, like these guys are bigger, these guys are a bit stronger. But again, it's how you respond to it, and eventually you got to make them respect you with your play, whether you're bigger or whether you're smaller. So those mentalities in these big games with these type of players, that's your best way when you're outnumbered in size and maybe even in talent.
And the thing is, those two don't seem hesitant when they take the ball between the tackles. I don't see a lot of false steps and
Yeah, I agree.
deer in the headlights look. It is maybe just a matter of getting bigger and stronger to fit this new offense, because Dylan Jones should be a pretty good fit, but neither one of them were recruited to play in that out of high school, which brings me to my next point. I don't know if I'm making anything out of this, but Wisconsin gets the ball back with like 3.5 minutes left. Most teams are going to start pushing the ball downfield and try and get another score. I mean, 38-21 looks a lot better than 38-14, if you can get it. Wisconsin, I think, runs 6 more plays on their last drive, and they're all runs. Did you take that as a sign from Luke Fickell as we need to establish some momentum going into Big Ten play here? And even if it means losing by 7 points less, not that they're not trying to score, obviously, but the chances you're going to be able to go the length of the field on 6 runs are slim to none. Did it feel like to you that he was trying to send a message or get some momentum and just find anything positive in this run game to get it going before Big Ten play here?
That's a good perspective that I didn't really think about. I mean, maybe they are trying to get some momentum to where guys end the day on a high note, on how they could run the ball. I thought it was interesting. There was about, I don't know, less than a minute or maybe a minute left, close to 2 minutes, where our quarterback kept the ball and ran for a first down. And
Mm.
I'm thinking, like, why are we running our quarterback with 2 minutes left and we're not going to win the game? Like, we're down to our backup quarterback.
Mhm.
So I saw that perspective of, at this point, you either go and try to score or get everybody out and get healthy, stay
Yeah.
healthy. So that was kind of more of what I would have kind of expected or wanted. But I mean, if I didn't think about the perspective of having some momentum in the run game, and if that's what he was trying to do to continue to get reps, with what they need to work on, I don't see anything wrong with that. But running the quarterback, your backup quarterback, with 2 minutes left in a game you're not going to win, it made me a little bit nervous.
What do you think of Cade Yakimelli? I know a lot of people want to see him get more touches, and he was the guy that was in there the last couple plays and had a nice run, I believe, to either cap off the game or close to cap off the game there. He runs a little differently, looks to have a better center of gravity, more upper body strength. I know he was going up against the reserves in that game, but we have a large enough sample size of Yakimelli. I don't know. Given what you saw from those two backs on Saturday, do you think Yakimelli's the guy maybe they need right now just to steady this ship and keep that ball moving forward by any means necessary in the run game? Because I'm starting to lean his way, going into Maryland here.
I can see Yakimelli being a spark plug for this team in general. I know he's well respected in the locker room. Everybody wants to see him succeed, and a guy like that can go and set the tone. He's big enough, strong enough. We've seen it clearly on tape that he'll run with some bad intentions. And if you can have a guy like that to kind of spark something that's needed in the offense, I mean, play him. And if he's good enough to compete with those other two, which he is, what we did in the safety room, at least when we were there, and we had really good safeties. If you were hot, you keep the hot hand out there. And I think that type of rotation might be best when you're trying to spark something, create some momentum for the offense, create some confidence, especially in a guy with like that. If you see him lower his shoulder and run somebody over, run for 10, 12 yards on a run, that sideline's going crazy because they want him to do well. And I just know that just from knowing him personally. I don't know what they think about the other two backs. They might have the same respect, but I know that can be a momentum starter. And I would love to see that as well because I know he can help the offense and give it a little bit of a different juice.
Before we wrap up Alabama here, I know it wasn't pretty on Saturday. I know there weren't a lot of highs outside of Wisconsin's run defense. And you know what? Their tackling, I thought was really good. In a game like this, you can have a lot of plays where you miss something and, it's off to the races for Alabama. And it's been like that a lot for a lot of Wisconsin teams when they play games like this. The tackling's been a huge issue. I think they only had two missed tackles on Saturday, and I was really impressed for most of the game. Just the ability to come up and either get hats to the football or the first guy was able to make his play one-on-one, even if it was a chunk play for Alabama. But if there's one thing of a positive that, if you're Luke Fickell and, you want this team feeling good about themselves going into Big Ten play and they're able to flush this one as quickly as possible, what do you say to that team that maybe keeps their head high, something they did really well on Saturday, if there is anything?
Defensively, I think controlling the trenches is definitely a positive. Great teams stop the run. Great defenses stop the run. So that's definitely something that they can take away and be confident in going forward into Big Ten play. And like you said, I think tackling is, they did a great job. And even on those sit routes, they were chipping away, but you had runners of the ball. You had 3-4 guys running around trying to make a play. And I think just getting back to making big plays on defense, game-changing plays, turnovers. I think creating turnovers is what will set your offense up in a time where they are struggling to be able to, create some momentum for the whole team. So, and I think special teams as well. I mean, I think with that kickoff return, that great punt. I think playing clean special teams is something that they need to continue to be consistent at. That's, I think, slightly overlooked in a lot of positives for Wisconsin right now because it's overlooked with so much negativity. But special
Yeah.
teams is going to be key going into conference play, and staying clean on special teams is going to be big.
Now here's the play that, if you're Fickell, you're MFing your team all week for. I forgot to talk about this, so I'm just going to throw it in now. But the beginning of the third quarter, the trick screen pass where Alabama doesn't run it all that clean and it takes forever to develop. And they hit a home run right out of the gate to essentially put the game away. Wisconsin's defense looks like they greatly overcommitted to the quarterback, despite that thing taking forever to develop. And I think everybody in the stadiums, at least the people wearing Wisconsin gear, are saying, stop running to the quarterback. The ball's going the other way. And then the guys that were there are just getting run over. Bodies are falling. It was Ryan Williams who caught the pass, barely gets touched. What were you thinking on that play, watching that one unfold?
I mean, everything seemed weird about the play, right? Especially on the snap of the ball. There aren't too many people moving. It's kind of slow moving, like you said. It was very slow to develop. As a defensive player, when you feel it, like you may not see it, but you feel it. Something is up. There's some BS going on. I mean, kind of get a feel of what, the big picture of things, right? If you see some guys, running out to the sideline for a screen, whatever it might be, you got to halt. And especially if you're on the second and third level, kind of being able to have those instincts and being able to feel out some BS on a play, that's that's something that I think needs to be worked on. But also, I mean, it's an instinct. You got to be able to feel that out. And I don't know if they were just caught sleeping, all 11 of them, just because it was early into the second half. I don't know, but normally you at least have one or two sniffing out something's up with this play, something's wrong, and then you feel it out and you go rally. And at least if somebody feels it out and you got an O lineman coming at you on a screen, you're just throwing your body in there to get it inside, right? And
Yeah.
so you didn't see any of that though on that play, and that was clearly a momentum killer as well after a kickoff return for a touchdown. That did not help.
Moving on to this week, Wisconsin's going to host Maryland, 11 a.m. on NBC. I was joking with somebody that, and it's not really a joke anymore, but it kind of is. But this is the biggest game of Luke Fickell's career in some way, and I don't mean big in terms of what a win does for you, because as far as the big picture goes, it does nothing. Wisconsin's 4-0 all time against Maryland. They're winning those games by an average of about 25 points. 3 of the 4 they've won by double digits. Regardless of where this program is at home, I think you're still expected. I think there's still an expectation that the Badgers should roll a team of this caliber. However, if you lose it, what do you think that means for the future of either Luke Fickell or, this program?
I think you're at a point now where you haven't won the big game, right? So we're not good enough to beat Alabama. We weren't good enough to make it to a bowl game last year. Are we good enough to beat an unranked Big Ten team? That's what everyone's questioning right now.
We have to question that.
That's what everyone's
That's where
questioning
we
because
are.
there's no momentum for this program to believe that this is a gimme win or this is a capable win that this program should win at this point. We're not there. And so I think, and I believe it was Vince Beagle, he had a tweet that said, don't judge. We're not judging Luke Fickell off Alabama. We're going to judge him off Big Ten play. And I think he made a great point. And this is the start of Big Ten play. And we still have so many question marks, probably the same question marks that we had playing Miami of Ohio. So now we have a little bit of a more competitive team than Middle Tennessee and Miami of Ohio, but maybe a little bit lower par than Alabama. Can we win this game? If we don't win this game, then I think there's going to be a lot more different negative comments going in that are a bit more real than what they are right now, even after the Alabama loss.
And the thing about it, too, is even if they were to get upset on Saturday, there are so many opportunities on the schedule to sort of undo the damage. It's why I don't call it necessarily a do or die. But obviously, this would be the biggest, most frustrating loss of his career. I guess you could argue. I mean, obviously, people will point to just losing the axe at Minnesota, but this one would feel a little different, just because it's year three. You know, you're supposed to be turning it around at this point, and that would send to me a clear message that not only is this thing not moving forward, not even it's not even stagnant. It's moved well backwards. Now, maybe we look at the end of the season. I mean, Maryland is 3-0 right now. I know they had a tough time against Northern Illinois at home, but they got an exciting freshman quarterback. Mike Loxley's always recruited really well in the DMV. They had a couple pros last year. Maybe they're a better team than we think they are. There's always that as well. But worst case scenario, you lose this one, lose it by a couple touchdowns. Does that signal to you at all that this is over, or do you feel comfortable, waiting the end of the end of the season, just because there's so many good teams left on the schedule, and like I said, I think there's a lot of damage you could undo, even if the worst case scenario happens on Saturday.
I think it's all about instilling confidence, and I think that we're still at that question mark of, can Luke Fickell instill confidence in these players and this program and these fans? There's been no sign of instilled confidence up to this point. But if you win this game on Saturday, then you still give these fans, you still give these players some confidence that, hey, maybe we can do this thing. Maybe we can go and run the Big Ten. I think that's the huge part of this game. And it's going to take a lot of leadership from him and his staff to be able to instill that going into this weekly prep for the players. And again, it's not a do or die situation, like you said, because there's still a ton of ball to play, ton of big games, but you want to believe that you can win those games, right? So this is where the staple of the season is, I think, of instilling confidence to be able to go oversee the rest of conference play.
And I remember, and good for you for bringing up running the Big Ten. That at least your standard hasn't changed. I don't think anybody else is talking about Big Ten championships anymore. At least not now. But I remember 2021 where you guys had that rough start. You start 1-3 and had some, or at least the game against Michigan got out of hand there, and then you guys were able to bounce back, and it kind of sent the message. You were beating the teams you were supposed to beat and beating them decisively, and it kind of sent the message that it was more about the schedule than who we are as a football team. And this program really hasn't dropped off, although the start got a little rough there with Graham Mertz going down, and you guys had to play Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan in 3 of your first 4 games. But before we go, was there ever a time in your career that you felt the game was similar to this one? Again, not do or die, but maybe it was that first game after Michigan where you're questioning who you are, and a win's not really going to do anything for you. You expect to win, but if you lose it, a lot of people are going to be talking, a lot of eyebrows are going to be raised, and it's going to feel like the sky is falling.
It was Purdue of 2021. I can't remember the week that was. I don't remember if that was before or after
the game where you guys only threw it like 10 times or whatever in West Lafayette.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we ended up having, I think, 4 or 5 turnovers that game. It was one of the funnest games that I was a part of with our defense. And I remember the week of that game, one of our coaches came up to me and just kind of got in my ear and said, "Hey, you realize this is the biggest game of the season." And I believed him, because at this point, we don't have anything to make people believe that we are who we are. And I knew who we were, because we should have at least been a lot closer with Notre Dame. We should have beat Penn State. And Michigan was really the only team to me that actually, like, I tipped my cap, y'all were the better team that day. That's how I felt. And maybe the fans can think differently, but that's how I felt. So I fully believe that We are a dominant team. We should be competing and running the Big Ten to get to the Big Ten championship. And I would have been absolutely itching to play Michigan a second time and see what that result would have been in the Big Ten championship, because I think it would have been a lot different outcome playing them a second time. Not saying we would have won. They won the national championship that year, but that's how we felt though. But going into Purdue, I was told this was the biggest game of the season, and he was right. And we had one of the best games of the year, and it created that spinning wheel where we were believing in ourselves, created some momentum of winning, some momentum of success on the field. And it kind of gave us a different mentality of how we go out there every day at practice and in the game. And it helped. We went on a big streak, and everybody else in that locker room believed. So it's possible. You just got to freaking believe. And if these players don't believe, you're in trouble.
Aside from the score, what would you want to see on Saturday that just makes you take a breath and say everything's going to be okay?
I would love to see players feeding off of each other. Big plays, offense, defense. I mean, defense setting up the offense creating comfortability for the defense. A lot of getting after the quarterback, making this freshman quarterback at Maryland very uncomfortable, taking advantage of being at home, and a lot of fun jump around. That's what I would love to see, because then it's like, okay, maybe we are getting back on track here going into the meat of the season here. So creating that identity, find that identity. Who are you? What do you do well? What's our mentality every week, every game? I mean, it's not a stupid slogan that you put on your t-shirt. Like, what is your mentality that you all believe, and how are you going to go out there and apply it and be successful with it? That's what I would love to see, kind of finding that identity, because if you don't find it now, it's going to be too late when you start playing these other teams.
Was it Coach Chris that told you that Purdue game was the biggest one of the season?
It was Coach Al, one of our assistant defensive backs.
Okay.
It was after a DB meeting.
I was just curious if you keep in touch with Coach Chris or what he's doing now, because he's kind of disappeared on us a little bit. Is he doing okay? Do you talk to him at all?
He's off the grid. He's off the grid. I saw him a year or two ago up in northern Wisconsin, and we were sitting around the fire with a lot of other teammates sharing stories and drinking beer and having a good time. And then I was supposed to see him at a wedding, Jack Dunn's wedding. He was invited, and I was really looking forward to seeing him. And he ended up not being able to make it, so we were sending videos and all that. But yeah, he's up somewhere on a lake enjoying his life, and pretty much off the grid. So I heard he had a few offers to be a head coach going into this year, and he turned them down. And he might have had the opportunity to be the OC at Iowa, I believe. So he turned that one down as well. And so I don't know kind of where his mind is at.
That would have been something.
Yeah. But I think he's doing great. And I've heard before, you got the two best jobs in the world, which is a newly hired head coach and a fired head coach, where you enjoy your buyout. And so that's kind of where he's at. He's enjoying himself.
All right, Wisconsin, Maryland, 11 a.m. from Camp Randall Stadium. We'll see if the Badgers are able to bounce back. Colin, thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Really appreciate it.